Welcome to this MACAG. That's our Masters in Corruption and Governance Careers evening. I know most of you know what MACAG stands for because we sent out this invitation primarily to our former students so we could have a careers catch up. But we also on social media invited others, and you're very welcome whether or not you've already been through a Sussex education. We have not just, of course, our masters, but also undergraduate students who study corruption and our PhD students. So the purpose of today's short session will be about an hour, is to hear from three of our alumni who have jobs in the field of corruption and governance. And I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves. And then we'll go through a series of questions that I'll ask them, and then we'll open it up to questions from those who are listening in. If you'd like to ask a question of any of our speakers, please put it in the chat, and later in the session when I invite people to ask a question, feel free to ask it in person. So for the introductions, I'm Robert Barrington. I'm Professor of Anti-Corruption Practice here at Sussex University. I teach on our Masters in Corruption and Governance, and I've had a bit of a history in this space of corruption studies. I used to work primarily for Transparency International. Lena, could I come to you next?
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Oh, can I hear it twice? No, it's okay. Yeah, so as Robert mentioned, I'm Lena Raballand. I am, or very soon to be finished, but I'm a PhD student here at the University of Sussex. So just finished waiting on my corrections to be approved, but basically that. Since finishing the PhD, I now work at the National Crime Agency in the UK Civil Service, and my background's a bit it's been a bit varied. After I did my bachelor, my master's, and then I did a bit of work at UNODC, working on illicit trafficking and then asset recovery. I did an internship at control risks in the private sector, and then a little bit of work at the OECD as well. So it's been a bit of a journey to get here, but that's where I'm at now.
Great, thank you. Louise.
Hi everyone, I'm Louise. It's a bit difficult to follow up after Lena. She has an amazing repertoire, but I'm also a former MACAG student. I currently work at Unilever. I'm a business integrity lead at Unilever. My role supports the governance of our business integrity program. In practice, that means that I manage our speaker platform, and I also oversee and report to our business integrity committees, as well as reporting to other governance bodies that we have, including board level governance bodies. I graduated from the MACAG in 2024, and I had some previous experience in the financial crime prevention consultancy world before joining Unilever.
Thanks, Louise. And our final speaker for the evening, Tom.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tom Wright. I did the Masters about 10 years ago now. Since then, my main job has been working for Transparency International UK since 2017, I think, 2018. I started in the international development sector in healthcare, in anti-corruption, and I was the research manager in that program for about 8 years before I pivoted recently into data, AI, machine learning, quantitative analysis, which I do across Transparency International UK.
Great, thank you. So you'll have spotted that we have representatives here from the private sector, Louise at Unilever, from civil society, Tom at Transparency International, and from the public sector with Lena at the National Crime Agency. One thing I should make clear is that everybody is speaking in their personal capacity, so nobody is saying anything that represents their organization, just to get that out of the way. So I want to start with the first question. I'm going to ask both Louise and Lena this. We'll start off with Lena. How did you go about finding the job that you wanted in this field of corruption and governance?
Yeah. So I guess the short answer is I found my job on LinkedIn. I was looking on sort of towards the end of the PhD, I was looking at different jobs to apply for, and specifically the civil service job was on LinkedIn. They were having a recruitment wave. So I applied through there. The long answer was I think I tried a bit of everything. As you can see on the panel, there's a lot of different ways I think anti-corruption can be tackled. So I tried, I think, during my studies, because I wasn't tied down by a 9 to 5, I tried loads of different things. So I did a few internships, like I mentioned at the beginning, whether it was in international organizations, whether it was in the private sector with control risks, in different international organizations. I did a bit of research as well, working for a think tank. So I tried to kind of see all the different angles that we could do or work in the anti-corruption field. And what I enjoyed the most, I think, was the public sector side. But that answer only kind of came in after having done seen or done lots of different things, I guess.
Great. Louise, before I come to you, I just want a follow-up question to Lena. You mentioned you'd done a few internships, and you said that control risks and OECD and one or two other places you'd worked at. Could you tell us how you went about finding those internships, and was that easy, and what kind of things were they looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they all built on each other. So the first internship I ever did was with UNODC on their container control program. That was back in 2022 when I was doing my master's. And at the time, I was interested in doing a internship with the UN. So I just logged on to their UN portal. Basically, I spent about a week mass applying. Essentially, I think I set myself a target about 5 applications a day, and then did that for about 7 days. So I got to about 35, 40 applications. And eventually one got back to me and I did an interview and I got the job. So that was the first one. So if any of you are interested in UN internships, I highly recommend, and I'm happy to have a chat with you separately about that. Once I did the UNODC internship, later down the line, I wanted to do the OECD internship, and that was a call was put out, and one of my teachers at the time, one of my tutorial leaders at the time saw it and then sent it to me. And I applied through there. And because I'd done the UNODC one, it sort of fed into that. And when I did consulting for STAR, so the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative, which is a joint World Bank and UNODC program, I had written an article sort of in my personal capacity for the research think tank that I was writing for at the time. And I sent the article that I wrote out to one of as you might be aware, the ACAN network, which is an email network where people share sort of loads of different articles, pieces of news, etc. I shared it on there, and someone who was working at Star saw the article, which had been making a mind map of all these actors involved in the Qatargate scandal, if you've heard of that. And they were looking for someone to work on their database that they were redoing at Star, and they found that the skills to do the article were similar. So they reached out and asked if I would work for them at Star. So that was sort of came from writing. Which I guess the point I think I try to share in this session is I think it's cool to try loads of different things, even whether or not you think it might land a job. I think trying loads of different things was what really helped, I think, in the long run. And I didn't necessarily always know something was going to lead to a job, but I think it opened up more doors, trying to hear things here and there just for the sake of it, essentially.
Great, thank you. Louise, can I come to you and ask you to reflect on that, but also the original question, how did you go about finding the job you wanted?
I completely agree with Lena. I think the more you build your work experience in your CV, the easier it is for you to understand your own path and what would you like to build your career in. And at the same time, the stronger a candidate you are for the vacancies that you're applying. So I very much resonate with that, and I think my journey was quite similar to some extent. The first thing I did right after the master's was book applying to as many vacancies as I could in financial crime prevention or anti-corruption in the private sector, because that's what I already knew that I wanted to do. From my actually experience, the internship experience during the master's. So I book applied, and I eventually got my first job after the master's, which was in this financial crime prevention consultancy in London. And it was an incredible opportunity because at consultancy, you get to meet several clients and have a lot of exposure to different kind of risks. So I developed many skills and technical knowledge as well. And it kind of also helped me realize that I did not want to build my career in consultancy long term. So I started exploring in-house opportunities. And so the first thing was, I think, keeping an open mind and trying to apply and build my career. And then the second thing was to connect with people and keep working on those connections. So when I started exploring in-house, I contacted some of my former colleagues from the masters, and one of them saw a vacancy, which was this job that I currently do at Unilever, on LinkedIn, and she thought of me and she sent me via DM. So that's how I became aware of this vacancy. I didn't know before that. And I was lucky enough that she didn't apply. She was not interested. So she's incredibly smart and so competent that she would be a very strong candidate. But that's how I found out about this vacancy. I think it's very difficult to know about every single vacancy that is out there that can match your profile. So keeping those connections and trying to help each other, if you know people from the same sector, from the anti-corruption field, I think is very useful and helpful.
Great, thank you. And just in trying to draw out a few threads from what you've both said so far. So actually some short-term assignments in different places are useful. Then keeping an eye out, you both mentioned LinkedIn, but also maybe using your networks, one of which will be this alumni network, as a means of finding out what's going on and what there is out there. Can I just come back to both of you on the internships or your short placements? You obviously weren't sure whether that was going to be a sort of long-term career, but you were willing to take short placements. Sometimes those are criticized for not being very good working conditions, sometimes being unpaid. How was it for you? Were you paid? Were they good working conditions? Did you learn a lot, or was it just being there and getting that on your CV that was important? Maybe I'll ask Louise first, then come to Lena.
Yeah, I think the priority for me at that time was to gain as much hands-on experience in the anti-corruption and financial crime prevention and ethical building career as I could. So that was my main priority at the moment. I interned at Good Corporation as part of the MACAG. Good Corporation is a business ethics consultancy. And for me, it was quite a defining moment because that's when I had my first contact with any business integrity work in the private sector. And that's how I actually realized that that's the path within anti-corruption that I wanted to follow. So it was incredibly helpful and important for my career. And as part of the internship, so the actual work, the kind of things that I did were reviewing the new failure to prevent fraud offense as part of the ECCTA, and also reviewing like risk assessments and compliance programs and benchmarking how companies stand, how prepared they are for this new offense. And those are the kind of things, so benchmarking, risk assessments are the kind of things that I still do on my day-to-day job, and that I believe I will do for the rest of my career. So they are so valuable. It was very, very useful for me. So I highly recommend. I think that's my main recommendation from the masters.
Great. And if I recall, that particular internship was as a module within the masters, so
Yes.
that was also part of the course.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Lena, how about you?
Yeah, that's a really good, really good question, actually. So I'll say a few few things. So I've done basically three internships in the past few years. I've had varying experiences. The first one at UNODC, I think it was a very good experience. Was given quite a lot of responsibility, just because, as you might know, the UNODC can be quite understaffed in certain areas, and I think it became apparent it was there for 6 months. And I think I realized quite quickly that they needed interns because they just didn't have the funding basically to have full-time staff. So that was good we were two interns. That was quite good for us because it meant that we were given quite a lot of responsibility to kind of work on the things they were working on, whether it was grant applications or working with customs officials, et cetera, on illicit trafficking. So I was given quite a lot of responsibility just because of the staffing issues they have. Secondly, for the OECD, I was there also for 6 months. And that was different. It was a lot more a kind of very well-oiled machine. I had slightly less work or responsibility given as an intern, but at the same time, it was a very valuable experience in that I was always interested in the work the OECD was working on, and I was working specifically in the anti-corruption division. And those 6 months were valuable in understanding exactly what type of work they were doing, and whether or not I found that interesting. So it was a good kind of taster for whether or not I would want to commit working there long term. In the long run, I found that it was a very technical work they were doing. A lot of the work they do is basically evaluating how countries implement the OECD Convention against foreign bribery. I'm sure you've come across it. So it was a lot more technical than I was expecting, but it was nice to know that that's the kind of work they were doing so that I could sort of make a bit more informed decision about whether I'd want to work there long term. And then thirdly, at Control Risks, I was there for 3 months. So in the consultancy space in the private sector. And same thing there. I think 3 months was good to be given sort of responsibility on the team. And that was paid. So the OECD and the control risk were paid. The UN internship was unpaid. I'll come back to that in a second. But control risk, I think it was good as well. I think internships, while you all, I'm sure, are considering applying for jobs, I think internships are very interesting and can be very valuable because they give you sort of 3 to 6 months where you can see if that's really what you want to work on. And even if you want to work on that specific team without necessarily committing long term. And I enjoyed control risk, but I think I found really quickly it wasn't necessarily the space I wanted to work in. But because it was an internship, I could have kind of the time ran out and then I just moved on to something else. So they're very valuable in deciding what you want to do. Just on the UN ones, UN internships I think are good compared to other ones because they can be quite flexible depending on the teams you were working on. I did all of my internship remotely, so I wasn't paid, but at the same time, I didn't have to incur any costs by moving anywhere. So that's something you can kind of take into consideration, whether you do an internship, is how flexible they are, whether you can work from home remotely, et cetera. That can be a benefit, and whether you can combine it with your study. So I did the UNODC internship when I was
Lena, I think we might have lost you. I don't know if you can hear us, but you've just frozen on the screen.
I thought it was just my view. I think, yeah.
This being the occupational hazard of the online meetings, as we all know. So pending Lena's return, Tom, I'm going to ask you some questions in a moment, but I just wondered if you had anything you wanted to reflect on this point about making a start with shorter term jobs. I know it's a while since you were looking for a job because you've been settled in TI for quite a time now, but do you think that's a good way to go?
I mean, yeah, it has been quite a while. I don't think I've ever had an internship other than under MACAG, and it was very useful at that point, because it was part of the I can't remember it's called the All Parliamentary Group Anti-Corruption, and I continued doing that in my spare time when I could after the MA finished. Um, I think it's a very good introduction. The issue is whether you can afford it, basically. That's the main issue for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, Tom, because it has been a big issue around internships and temporary placements, and it's great to hear that an organisation like Control Risks is is paying them. Sometimes they're not paid because they're part of a course, as they are in the MACAG course. But this question about how you can afford to do an internship is really crucial, I think. But I think more and more organisations are signing up to, particularly in your sector, Tom, in amongst civil society, are signing up to schemes where they at least pay a minimum wage and sometimes the living wage as well. Sometimes depending on which country, a stipend or an honorarium, as it's sometimes described, but at least to cover some basic costs. But it is an issue, I think. I want to come on to the next question, which again I'm going to pose to Louise and Lena. Lena, welcome back. We lost you temporarily, but glad you've returned. So you both have entered this job market relatively recently. And I'm really interested to see if you've got a sense of, how you assess the state of the jobs market in this field, both in the UK, but also more broadly than the UK, if you think you can comment on that. Louise, could I come to you first, actually?
Yeah, of course. So I think if we look overall, right, across sectors, the past months have been quite challenging. Several companies, including Unilever, have responded to the current world instability that we're living in by imposing hiring freezes across their organizations. So I think this has impacted all sectors and all functions. But I think it's a momentary condition. It's temporary, and we should go back to normal very soon. If we look at compliance, business integrity sector, like anti-corruption in the private sector specifically, I think the demand for professionals is strong, and it's actually growing in some areas. So I think we're seeing, for instance, a significant increase in demand for experts in sanctions compliance, which is very closely related to corruption. And I think you can tell why there is an increase in demand, considering the geopolitical status that we currently see ourselves. So getting more expertise in areas that are correlated with corruption can help build a stronger, I think, CV. And then I think there is also a growing demand for professionals that have some expertise in AI. And I'm sorry to be the one bringing AI into a webinar, as you probably, there's always one, right? It's kind of like a rule now that AI needs to be brought up. But it is true, I think. So professionals that have some technical knowledge of how we can integrate AI into compliance programs. I've seen, for instance, the use of AI to support insights of investigations or data metrics from investigations in multinational companies is quite relevant at the moment. So I think in like a nutshell, there are areas that are very high in demand for professionals in our field.
Thank you. Lena, what about you, the state of the jobs market at the moment?
Yeah. No, I think that was a really good answer by Louise. I really agree with it. I think overall it's been there's been a bit of shrinking, I think, in the job market overall. Obviously, international organizations have been quite hard hit by restructurings, budget allocations, etc. But at the same time, I think there is demand for practitioners with sort of a background in corruption. I think having a degree or doing a degree that specifically focused on corruption is extremely valuable because there have definitely been spaces where I've done my sort of internships and work. People don't necessarily have a background where they've done a master's in corruption. So I think it's very valuable to say, I've studied this specifically, and I think it looks very good. Like Louise was saying, I think it's important to be quite flexible, but also recognizing the skills that you've gained from the studies and how they can translate to a job. That's essentially what the recruiters are looking for is what have you practically learned, whether it's, report writing, whether it's data analysis, et cetera, and how that can be helpful to them. So really recognizing and being able to explain in a job interview, I've done a research report on this, for example, I've analyzed this data, et cetera. So taking the kind of maybe theoretical, maybe trying to unpick the kind of practical skills you've gained in your kind of work that could be interesting to a recruiter. So like when I did my PhD, it's sort of like, no, I'm not mostly doing research. It was a lot of the interview was about, okay, but what are the skills that you learned in the PhD that's important or applicable to us? So have a think about that. And I think there's quite a lot actually we can skip over in terms of practical skills we gain, but there's actually quite a lot of practical skills you're gaining in the work and the research that you're doing right now.
Great, and we're going to come to some of those in a minute, actually. Louise, there's a question for you in the chat, which I just want to touch on with you before we go on to my question to Tom. So the question in the chat is, you said that having done an internship at a consulting firm, you felt that consulting wasn't for you. And what was it about consulting that you felt made you feel you'd prefer to work in-house?
That's a very good question. I think at consulting, you interact with a lot of clients, so that gives you, as I mentioned, a lot of exposure to different risks, and you can learn very quickly. But at consulting, you don't necessarily see the long-term impact of your projects. It can be that a client stays with you for 2 or 3 years, but it's very difficult to follow up on the progress you have. And that's why I personally decided that in-house would be more appropriate for me, because at in-house you can see the long-term effects of the projects that you are working at. So, we have several projects that I'm currently working in that we are scheduled to renew only in 5 years' time or in 3 years' time. So I think that was the main reason that brought me to in-house.
Great, thank you. Tom, I want to come to you now. You've worked for a number of years, you can tell us how many, in Transparency International, which of course is incredibly well known in this field. But it's also a civil society organization, which is quite unlike Unilever or the National Crime Agency. What's it like working in a CSO like TI?
Thank you. Great question. I think I'm going to start with a caveat, which is that I can only speak from the perspective of TI UK. CSOs can be very different from place to place, and mostly from a research perspective. But the honest answer is it suits some people extremely well, I think. I imagine it doesn't suit everyone, but I think that's for people that don't work in CSOs to answer, not me. There are a couple of downsides, of course. Compared to the private sector, you're not there to maximize your salary. But the upside is that you get to work on genuinely interesting public interest questions, and are often close to live issues like new data sets, leaks, investigations, policy windows, emerging risks, and for me, especially new methods. Sometimes you're working on things that no one has worked on before, or really worked out how to study it properly yet. For TI specifically, I think one of the things that I've really valued is the caliber of people. You meet some of the most interesting and intelligent people and committed people that you're likely to come across. And that's definitely not a bad perk, even if it doesn't show up in your payslip. TI specifically is quite interesting because it sits between worlds. Some CSOs will often sit outside or away from the government and use public pressure and confrontation to get their point across, which is a really good approach for some situations, for some CSOs. But for TI, it's not academia, it's not journalism, it's not consultancy, but it touches on all of those. You may be producing research, influencing policy, or responding to live political developments. But the thing about TI is that it works really well with the other circles. So, for example, TI is known as the critical friend of government, so it can influence from within having conversations within rather than from shouting outside. Um, I think this has been alluded to already, but I think civil society organizations especially have been hit by the economic strains globally at the moment, with the collapsing of USAID and the reduction in ODI across across the world basically. And that exacerbated an existing problem, which is CSOs generally underfunded and have restricted funding cycles or project funding cycles, sorry. So it means that you're often chasing that, or priorities can shift very drastically, and that's even more the case now, which also has influenced what the other two speakers were talking about in terms of like the labor market at the moment, especially in international development. I mean, it would obviously be nice if everyone just gave us lots of money and did what we wanted with it, but obviously that's not how the world works. So my overall answer is it's competitive and sometimes uncertain, but it can also be intellectually rich, varied, and close to world change, I think. And for the right kind of person, that's very worth it, very much worth it.
Thanks, Tom. There are some great questions being posted in the chat, and I'm going to try to bring those in to my further questions. But Tom, I've got a follow-up question to you, which is that you mentioned that you started off in TI in the Global Health Program, and you've had a kind of career switch, but within the same organization, in that you're really strongly into the data analytics side of things. Can you tell us a little bit about what data analytics involves in this sphere, but also how on earth did you gain those skills?
Okay. Well, the switch, I'll go on to the skills in a second, but the switch from health or public health, global health to data and analytics was a natural one at the moment because the international development community is so threatened. But in terms of getting those skills, and this speaks to the TI being a good place to work, is that it gave me the space to try new things and encourage me when it started to succeed, basically. So what happened was about 9 years ago, I worked in a procurement project, and procurement is probably the most available open data worldwide, comparable open data worldwide. And there's a lot of it. And I wanted to look at it better. And so from there, a seed grew, and I got really interested in learning Python, machine learning, some simple data stuff to begin with, but then you start to learn the more complicated stuff as the years go on. But yeah, it was as part of TI that I learned it. There was two questions there, and I think I've only answered one, Robert. Is that true?
It is true, but I can't remember the first one either. Don't worry about that. But I'm going to come to all three of you now to ask about what you have learned during your studies and how that relates to jobs in this field. And those are reflected in some of the questions here in the chat from Suzanne, from Abdiwali. And then we'll come on to some sort of very practical tips as we close the session. But first off, can we just hear what have you taken from your study of corruption that is helpful as you become a practitioner? Louise, could I start with you on that?
Yeah. So I think thinking overall, the main takeaways for me was how the modules helped me understand the anti-bribery and even financial crime regulatory framework, how they interact as well, how corruption interacts with other regulations and legislations across the globe. Also being able to analyze corruption risks in different sectors and in different countries, I think was one of the main skills that I gained as part of the master's. And they are so very much needed in a business environment. I don't use them for a research paper or academic paper any longer. but I still use them on my day-to-day like risk assessments or speak up assessments as well. And especially if you work in a corporation like Unilever that is present in over 100 countries.
Great. Lena, same question to you.
Yeah. I'd say what I've learned is that there's huge opportunities that already exist within at Sussex and the CSC in terms of growing your skills. I mean, straight off the bat, I think about we have the blogs, so there's always opportunities to write different blog posts if that's something that's interesting, and that's something that you can then show when you're applying to internships or jobs that you have experience writing kind of reports, memos, etc. So I really encourage you to take those opportunities. There's also the podcast that you can get involved in as well, perhaps with Kickback, whether it's sort of on the organizational side, organizing the guests that we have come on, whether it's marketing the podcast, etc. Those are skills that are really valuable, I think, showing to recruiters that you have experience. Because most places I've been at, they have some sort of podcast, for example. I mean, it's always something you can say, I've had experience working on a podcast, etc., doing the sound, etc. But overall, I think there's a huge amount of exposure you can get, now at the Corruption Center. There's a lot of very cool research that's being done with GIAs, for example. I mean, there was like 8, I can't remember the number of projects specifically. I think there's 8, with people doing very different types of research as well. So we know if you're interested in learning more about data analysis, etc., there's always the opportunity, I think, to reach out to those teams and say, hey, you're doing this research. Can you talk to me for an hour about what kind of data analysis you're doing and what that kind of looks like, and what kind of opportunities there would be to practice on that. And just the networking, I think pretty much everyone at the CSC pretty much knows everyone, I think, in the field somehow. So just having more conversations, I think, with people. I think sometimes, to me, it's really important in doing as many sort of quote unquote small things as you can think of, because they do really add up in the end, and you never know along the way who you kind of run into. So the more people you know, and I think the more you start with the smaller stuff, whether it's writing a blog post, whether it's getting involved in Kickback, whether it's attending events, etc. Those things really add up in the end. But also reaching out to the people that we know at CSC, I think can take people quite a long way.
That's great. And you mentioned earlier that you had done that really great little piece of network analysis on Qatargate. I say little piece because the output was, it was a beautiful sort of map, but the work that went into it looked as though it had been quite significant, actually. But that was then enough, having got that out there and circulated it, that people could see you had a certain set of skills and so on. So actually using the opportunities to do that, and even if it's just one blog or one thing you've done, you're often, when looking for a job, it's a competitive situation. If you've got something that just marks you out as something, you've got something more than everybody else, then that can be helpful.
Yeah.
Tom, can I pose the same question to you, which is what did you learn from your studies or take from being at Sussex that actually has been helpful career-wise?
Yeah, of course. I'm not, again, it was 10 years ago, so I'm not going to pretend like I remember every reading or a module title or anything like that. I think because I can't remember everything off the top of my head, I think the most important thing for me, I think it's still called this, is the understanding corruption part of the course, where we spent a lot of time asking what corruption actually is, how you define it, etc. Sorry, this is quite lot less specific than the other answers. This is more zoomed out. But at the time, I really enjoyed the slightly murky, wicked problem discussion around corruption. And I thought when I got a job, I assumed that in the real world, people would have somehow sorted it out and knew what corruption is. They haven't. In anti-corruption research, everyone still argues about definitions. It feels like being back in Sussex all the time. And it may have made me disproportionately annoyed when people add fraud to their definition and things like that. But more seriously, that comfort with blurry boundaries and the theoretical comfort and that no one knows for sure has been really useful. A lot of applied anti-corruption work is about being precise without pretending the world is tidier than it is, essentially. So that is something that really stuck with me. Something from for Abdiwali as well. The question in the chat is that one of my essays was on community monitoring and procurement in Afghanistan. One of my dissertation. And it turned out that's exactly what I did for my first role at DI. So it very much shaped how my career progressed because I can answer in the interviews. But yeah.
Full cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah, I want to ask a very quick question then of Louise and Lena. Can you tell us what Louise, you did a master's dissertation, Lena, you did your PhD. Can you just tell us what subjects they covered? Louise first.
Yeah, so my dissertation was on the Petrofac case, the bribery that Petrofac involved itself in, and how we can understand the UKBA failure to prevent bribery offence as part of this case, and what are the limitations of the failure to prevent bribery, as well as how practical it can be for deterring corruption in the private sector.
Great. Lena, what about your PhD?
Yeah, so I essentially looked at state capture and how state capture happened and resilience to it in South Africa. So essentially what I was trying to do was, first of all, develop a theoretical framework to identify state capture and resilience beyond the state level, but in organizations. So I did 2 case studies in state organizations and then 2 case studies in local government. So trying to look at and understand state capture beyond the sort of country level analysis that a lot of frameworks seem to do. And on the flip side, trying to understand state capture resilience and what that looks like, and I did a little bit on the role of political financing in facilitating mechanisms of capture and sort of the role of the historical context of South Africa specifically and its experience with state capture.
Great, thank you. Could I ask anybody who wants to ask questions, please post them in the chat. We are getting through the ones that are already in the chat. There are a few comments still to come. But please, if you'd like to ask anything else, put it in the chat. We've got about 15 minutes left to go. So now I want to ask a question to each of you, which is about skills that you didn't get from your studies. What skills would have been useful to get the job that you didn't have and you've subsequently had to acquire? And where did you get those skills from? Tom, could I ask that of you first?
Yeah, and I think I think a lot of my answer I've already said. The data analysis and AI, especially AI now. Sorry, I'm the second person that's brought it up, but I use it a lot. It is been incredibly useful for me, and I think it speaks to a broader thing, which is more about it's difficult to get a corruption expert. It's difficult to get a developer or coder. When you merge those 2 roles together, you provide added value beyond either of them individually. It means I could sit in and communicate properly with my organization while still being able to do the coding, etc. That doesn't just fit with just coding, actually, I think. Other people probably know better than me, but also research and advocacy, where different circles align, is what I would say is important. But my main answer is what I've already said, which is data analysis, basically.
Great. Lena, could I come to you on that then? What additional skills would you have liked or have you acquired beyond what you were getting from your studies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd probably say something similar. I think I felt quite well equipped with the skills that I got in the job, because my research is very qualitative focused, and my work has always relatively kind of been around there. I think maybe at control risks, a lot of the sort of private sector consultancy, they did quite a lot of auditing, which is very different from the background that I had. So perhaps I think it would have been nice to have more of a maybe sort of stronger skills in quantitative analysis, and data analysis, and sort of financial investigations, which I didn't have at the time, because I was more focused on qualitative research. But all that to say that I think I did learn on the job. I think I understood the concepts of accounting. So I was able sort of to talk to my colleagues and say, okay, well, how do you do this as well? So it was a bit of learning on the job as well. And then after the internship, I sort of thought, okay, I got a good understanding of that, and I was able to bring that forward. I think that would have been helpful. But at the time, I guess it wasn't. At the time, quantitative analysis wasn't as relevant to my research, so I didn't seek that out as much. Maybe in hindsight, I could have, even though it was relevant to my research, could have maybe developed my skills further in the prospects of maybe using it later on, even though I wasn't using it right now, essentially.
Great, thank you. Louise, same question to you. What would you have liked to know that you know now, or what other skills have you acquired and where did you get them from?
Yeah, I resonate a lot with what Tom said on data analysis, and Lena's also mentioned. My current role is heavily focused on reporting and investigation insights and also the governance of it. So I built a lot of my knowledge on Power BI, Excel as I went. But if you would to look for a role that is similar to mine, I would highly recommend that you build some skills or look for like a very short technical course on data analysis, maybe project management, tools like Power BI. Stakeholder management and communication is also very important because in my role, and this actually I also built as part of the master's, is being able to translate very complex terms and very complex investigations in my role into short summaries, executive level summaries that are relevant to our business, as well as sometimes they are shared around all the functions that need to be aware of them. So being able to interpret the data that you have or the investigation that you have and transform it in a way that is business appropriate is also very, very useful.
Great, thank you for that. We're in our closing minutes, and I want now to ask each of you what may be the most difficult question, which is the really practical tips. So by all means, repeat things you've already said just to really get the point home. But I think what we're after, and this is appearing a bit in the questions in the chat, is assuming you have done our slightly academic courses or some academic study on corruption. What steps should you take then to try and convert that into a career in this field? What are the practical things? Now, a few things have already been mentioned, and if you don't recover those, then I'll summarize those at the end. But top tips, practical tips. What would you say to people in this field setting out on a career? Since I didn't ask you to prepare this question in advance, I'm going to see if there's any volunteer to answer it first, and then we'll go to the others.
I don't mind.
Great.
I'd say two things. I'd say, first of all, identify how you can gain practical skills right now at Sussex, whether it's writing a blog post, whether, like I said, it's getting involved with Kickback, whether it's having a look through all the projects that are happening and reaching out to someone who's working on an area that you find interesting. Yeah, I think looking in would be my number one, my first point of my first advice. And second, as you all are doing, I'm sure, is looking out for what exists, what kind of jobs are out there, what kind of internships are out there. I mean, Tom had a great point about the feasibility of internships, of course, whether they're unpaid, I think is a big problem. But have a look where you can. I found internships have been a good gateway for a job afterwards. Most internships I did, I was sort of then could have led to a job. Whereas maybe if I'd applied to the job directly, I don't know if I would have gotten it as well. Whereas I think once I did the internship, people knew me a bit better, so it was a bit easier. So look out for internships and jobs. Even if you think the internships you might be a bit too qualified, have a look at those anyway. I think you might as well apply. And think about when you're applying, how can you sort of concretely explain to them that you have the skills from the research and from the degree. Really think about what can I show them concretely that I've done that will be applicable to them. But if happy to have a chat as well, like outside if anyone needs any sort of advice or help or anything doing that. But yeah.
Those are great tips. Thanks, Lena. Louise, can I come to you?
Yeah, yeah, I was completely agree with Lena, and if I was to add anything, is just to get as much work experience as you can during the masters as well. As you mentioned, you have internships, you have unpaid experience. You might be able to connect with people that are in projects that are short term that you can also support. So I think building your CV in that sense is very important. And then the other thing that also I also thought of was when you're applying to a job, interpreting what kind of gaps or what kind of issues that vacancy is trying to fill. And when you're interviewed or when you write your cover letter, try to explain how you and how your skills are the perfect match to fill those gaps and to really be the best person for the role. So I think that's why you need a bit of experience before you actually are applying to the kind of dream jobs.
And Louise, can I come back on the question Abdivali raised in the chat, which is to some extent, is it helpful to choose a dissertation subject or research subjects that may play well in a future job, or is it just the research skills you gain almost irrespective of the subject that are useful?
I do think it's a mix of both, because you will gain analytical skills as part of a dissertation or a module that you enroll. But the fact that you are able to apply those skills to a field that you want to work in, or that you can later explain that you chose this topic because you wanted to work in the area, that shows interest, that shows that you are proactively building your career. So I think that would be the best of both worlds.
Thank you. Tom, the problem with coming third is that people might already have given all the top tips that you were thinking of anyway. Is there anything that you have to add to what's already been said?
Yeah, I'm going to start my sentence to build on the other two answers, because I think they're really good. I think one of the things about understanding a job as not just your role, like just what, like writing about yourself, is really important, but also understanding what role you will fill. That was a really good point. I think it also goes slightly beyond that, in that you should probably understand at this point of view, this point in time, that it's the process through which your application will go. And that means for international development projects, for example, hugely competitive, which means that there's going to be a filter stage, which will be, because it's the easiest way to do it, find keywords, experiences, and it'll be very experience heavy from the employer's perspective. That's the easiest way to filter them. That's just true if you're going through 900 applications. So understanding that and building something that can speak to like a standard evaluative matrix or something like that is really good. But beyond that, when you get the chance to be really candid and to express yourself, personally, I like candid, plain spoken, really understanding the role and what they can bring to it. I had some other points, but I can't remember them. So I think I'll end on that.
That's great. Well, if they occur to you, by all means, come back in before we finish. We are actually drawing to a conclusion now. I want to mention a couple of other points which have come up, and those are networks that you can join. I think it was Lena in particular said networking was really important. You get a sense of what's going on out there, maybe what roles are available, what the trends are, what's going up, what's going down, but also you familiarize yourself with other organizations and they can get familiar with you. So the networking can be really important. And there are three networks that I typically suggest people become involved with. And of course, there will be others. By all means, suggest them if anybody can think of them. The first and most obvious is our own alumni network. We've got literally hundreds of people now who have been through PhDs and our master's courses, and many of them are working in this sphere, like the people that have been talking tonight. So they are themselves a great network. There's then, for those of you who are based in the UK, the TIPS network, which I'd really recommend. I think it's a really good community of people. They get together both virtually and in person in London, and you get the chance to talk to young professionals who are active in the kind of roles that all three of you have been talking about tonight. And then there's more internationally, or actually particularly US focused, there's the ACAN network that Lena mentioned. Um, Again, you can sign up to that, and I think it's well worth doing because you become part of quite a big now international network, and you find out what's going on and what people are talking about. You're part of the conversation, and that can be really helpful, I think, both in building your CV and writing a cover letter, but also then if you come to interview or indeed get to work in an organization, it means it's useful that you know what's going on and you can talk about those things as well. So just before we finish, I want to give each of you the chance to add anything that you think you might want to add or might have forgotten, or any extra points you want to make, and then we'll wrap up and say goodbye. So could I start with you, Lena? Anything you'd like to add, or is it just goodbye?
No, it's been nice to talk to everyone. I think the last thing I would say is that it's it's a difficult process. It could be it can be a challenging process to apply for things. So just kind of keep going. And yeah, I mean it's obviously easy to say it will work out when when it's worked out. But it's I think anyone can relate that it's always kind of difficult to apply for things. But just keep trying and keep throwing out the fishing rod as much as you can and getting involved in with as much as you can, and something will work out eventually.
Great. Thank you for those words of encouragement to everybody. Tom, anything you'd like to add?
Um, uh, Other than that, I'm on LinkedIn and people can message me if they want to ask for advice or anything like that. Also, next year, apparently, Robert and I are planning a data analysis thing. But yeah, just contact me if you need.
Great, thank you. And also to flag that LinkedIn has been mentioned several times. So if you're not on LinkedIn, sounds like you should be on it. Louise, any final words from you?
Yes, I'm also available if anyone would like to have a quick catch up. I would love to support. I do recognize, like Lena, that it can be quite challenging. And one thing that helped me when I was trying to not get too anxious about job seeking was to do my best and be conscious that I'm doing my best and that there are things that are just beyond your control. I myself call it like God's things. There are things that are like God's control. There are things that are by chance. There are things that are, I don't know. So just be conscious that you are doing your best, and don't try to over pressure yourself.
That's great advice. I mean, we've all been through this very difficult situation of looking for a job and the nerves and not knowing if you're good enough or other people better. But all of you three have succeeded really well. Great jobs. And it's very gratifying to see our students out there in the outside world doing the things that we've talked about on the courses. So it only remains for me to thank all of you, Louise, Tom, Lena. That was a really great session. Thank you so much. Thank you for those who listened in and all your great questions in the chat. And we'll put this recording on our YouTube channel if you want to look at it in due course, refresh your memory on anything. And please do be active in our alumni network. Nice to see you all, and thank you. Goodbye.